Often on chat boards and in books and so forth relating to weaving, one of the main pieces of advice given to newcomers is to tighten the weave as you go. But what exactly does that mean? Well, if we look at our weave in progress here, we can see that in our left jig we have a whole range of threads corresponding to our left list loaded, and on our right jig we have all the remaining threads that make up the weave in the various layers waiting to be moved back and forth as required. You can see our wrap thread here going down to our high-tech tensioning device. In this case I prefer to use an old textbook. I find it gives sufficient tension, particularly when I mount my desk lamp on top of it, and it moves the thread right back out of the way, which is how I prefer to work. So you don't have to have expensive equipment. You can get away with quite cheap setup. The looms that we're using are cost effective, and on anything up to about 100 thread weave are more than sufficient for the purposes. You can make your own. My first were made out of a couple of hair combs, but I find for ease of use the pre-made ones, in this case these are made by Doc Ski, are simple, effective, and the way that I choose to go. So if we go back to our weave and tensioning as we go, we'll just refer to our left list here, and we will see that we've got line 32, we need to load 34, so we'll just grab thread 34 from the right loom, bring it across, now as we go we need to be careful that the threads remain straight, as in on the same axis as the blank, and that they don't drift out. There's a natural tendency because of the V shape that the threads are held in for the threads to drift towards the outside of the blank. I've actually scribed a line down the blank at the outer perimeter where it's supposed to go, so I can keep the total width in line. But you also need to check as you're going. In this case we've got thread 33. Thread 34 should lay directly below it, which it does, and we need to make sure that it's parallel to the blank, so we just do a little pull down to keep it straight. And the other thing we do is, if you look back here, you can see that that same thread was used earlier in the weave, and there's just a slight bit of puffiness, so before we move it to the right, just give it a gentle pull, not too hard, we don't want to break it. And if we pull too hard we can actually pull the wrap thread here in, and the thread will disappear effectively, because when you burnish your wrap thread you'll cover it back up. That's particularly the case on any area where there's a single turn thread exposure. So we'll move this one over. 34, we need 35. Once again, straighten it up, give it a slight tighten. Move it to the left. Now 42. Remove 44. Again, give it a slight tighten, make sure it lays straight. 45 through to 54 remain constant. 55 and 56 are changing colours. So we remove the brown and grab a black thread, which again, slight tension, make sure it's straight. Replace the brown. Do the same for thread 56. Now you'll note that I'm using another highly technical piece of equipment here to manipulate my threads. You need to go and steal one of your wife's crochet hooks, or your mother's, or your grandmother's. This is a relatively small one and it's an ideal tool. So just slight tension, look back over, and place the brown thread in 56 on the right jig. 57 and 58 remain the same. 59 changes to black. You can see here we've got a slight tangle in our threads. So just slip that back under there. It's always best to let the threads lay wherever they want to lay, unless the tangle is because you've placed two threads in the wrong slot. So always check it out if you do get a bit of a tangle. But if one wants to be above the other, then let it go. Okay. 70 changes colour. One changes colour. Quite a bit of detail in this particular weave, so each rotation can take some time. And if you find that you're starting to lose concentration, the best thing is to do is walk away and come back later. .72 changes colour to black. Through to 80 remain the same. 81 is removed. 82 remains. Now we're ready to rotate our rod, but before we do, once again we need to try and straighten things up. You can see by the pushing and pulling here, our wrap thread is actually a little bit out of alignment. And you constantly got to battle the wrap thread moving out to the right here. So I take a packing tool, which is quite rounded on the ends, so that I don't cut the thread, and I just give it a little push back in there, in here, just to keep it all nice and tightly packed, because it's relatively easy to do it now, but it's very difficult to do it once the job is completed, because you're trying to move so many threads that are all under tension. So even a little bit of burnishing here, where I can see these threads here just separating or leaving a slight gap. It's very, very difficult to fix that later on, so it's really important that you touch it up as you go. So once that's all in line, we can rotate our rod, one turn, and we're ready to commence the whole process again.